It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Zanzi, welcome back to another episode of the live show here, right, on Expresso, opening up with S3, and we're celebrating, of course, the different cultures in our country, and it's, of course, in celebration of Heritage Month. Now, we're also taking a look at the unique languages that coexist in South Africa, and one of them being the Kaaps language, now, which this is the first time it's ever been consolidated into its own dictionary. And to tell us more about this is Director and Professor of Media Studies at the University of Cape Town, Professor Adam Haupt. Prof, how are you doing?
Thanks for inviting me. Good to be on your show.
Professor, is it safe for me to say aware? Is that a thing?
Aware.
Because I feel like that is a very Kaaps
Aware, yeah.
language. But for those maybe unfamiliar with what Kaaps language is all about, what exactly is it?
Kaaps, many people often, when they talk about Kaaps, they think about Kaaps as a variation or, a form of slang of Afrikaans. But what most people don't know is that Kaaps as a language actually cohered as early as the 1500s, well before Dutch colonialism. So the moment indigenous people interacted with migrants, with traders, maritime, traders, travelers, etc., that language began to take shape. And it isn't until much later, during legislated apartheid, that Afrikaner nationalists consolidated Kaaps into what we now know as Afrikaans through dictionaries, grammar, etc. And their mission was really to construct white Afrikaner identity and to use Afrikaans, the sort of Dutchified version of Kaaps, in order to consolidate white Afrikaner nationalism, essentially. So Kaaps predates Afrikaans, and it is not slang, it is not a dialect of Afrikaans, it is a language that precedes, Dutch colonialism.
Okay, all right. I actually had no idea about that, because genuinely for me, I just thought it was this mix and match of, like you said, slang and a little bit of hairstyle and all those things. But this is awesome. So let's talk about this. You've launched the first ever dictionary for the language, which I think is incredible. How exactly did this project come about then?
Okay, so quick correction. It's the launch of the project, and the first version of the dictionary will be available in 3 years' time.
Okay.
And so DCAS, Western Cape's Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport, has helped us, along with USAL H. Samialim, in giving us the seed funding to set this up. And what we're doing right now is we released the press release, and all hell broke loose. I kid you not, media went crazy. Wonderful love we received from so many people from different quarters. Didn't expect it. And so the idea is to put the press release out there whilst we launch the lexicography program. Every Friday we meet and we are trained by a lexicographer, and people gather words. We look at a body of work largely by artists. Because we're into hip hop, we started with hip hop, but we also have literature, work by Nathan Trantral, Trace Reese. Well, actually, I would like Trace Reese's work included, but we definitely have Nathan Trantral. We have Adam Small, apparently. We have all of this literature that goes back generations, as well as the contemporary hip-hop material, contemporary literature that we're using as an archive to consolidate, the language, the idioms, the words, the nouns, the verbs, etc., and compile the dictionary. Yeah.
Wow, I see Emil YX there as well, really bringing so much of our heritage to this project. What do you hope to achieve by doing this, Professor?
Well, basically, the idea is that Kaaps isn't recognized as a language, so that's the first step, to say to people, hey, you know what? Kaaps is a language in its own right. It has its own logic, it has its own history. The speakers of Kaaps need to be validated. You validate the people by validating the language that they speak. Right? And so that is the first step, to validate speakers of Kaaps. A. B, to use it as a resource to create bridges of understanding between different cultural and linguistic communities, which is an important thing for us. So the issue of racism that is so rife in the country, what if we use this as a means to actually create bridges of understanding, to look at the commonalities in our history? Because when you figure out what words mean and where they come from, you can see how we are linked to each other. Right? But just officially, a lot of speakers, when they engage with official institutions, government institutions, schools or universities that often, you need to speak properly,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you are told that you need to speak properly, then, your mode of expression, your identity is invalidated. And when we say to people, use this dictionary in the context of school, or in interactions in courts, etc., it will build understanding, and it will also validate the people who speak the language. So if we use it as a resource, maybe we'll get to a point where maybe in the academic context, it is acceptable for kids to speak Kaaps in class, and you don't have teachers telling them, jy moet suiwer Afrikaans praat, you have to speak properly and all of this nonsense. You can bring your cultural heritage into the classroom and feel seen, feel validated. You know what that does to you emotionally, but also pedagogically. It becomes an incredible strategy to make sure that the kids, the diverse kids in your classroom are acknowledged, and you bring them along. You don't alienate them in the classroom. Right? You bring them along through the entire system, and then they matriculate, maybe they go to university and write a PhD thesis in Kaaps, for example, right? Or policy documents for government in Kaaps. Can you imagine that, what that would do to the Cape Flats alone if people pick up a document, not just watch movies that stereotype them as gangsters, right?
Yeah.
Was laughable comic characters. But if you pick up a policy document or a novel or a PhD thesis, some serious scholarly book, and you go, hey, this is written in my language, what will that do to you emotionally, but also educationally? What does that do for for kids out there? What will that do for them? How will it motivate them? That is our aim. So validation is what we're after.
Oh, Professor, I think it's such a refreshing perspective on what has been deemed, like you said, slang. I think you're giving such great identity to a culture that's kind of been drowned out over the years. And I can't thank you enough for being a part of this project. Such exciting stuff, of course. One of the first dictionaries of the Kaaps language. We've got so many words that we were wanting to ask you, but
That Morse, how do I explain to someone what Morse means? For the longest time, I was just like, Morse, how do you explain it? But, we'll have to catch up with you some other time, Prof.
Thank you so much for your time. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. I can't commend you on the work that you're doing. Please keep it up. And we're definitely looking forward to seeing this book once it's published. And again, of course, a massive thank you. Yes, celebrating our culture, celebrating our heritage. And now to wrap up a little bit of this, but heading off to the news, and then we'll continue with the rest of the magic on the show.